Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. I am your host, Jared Asch. Today, I am joined by Todd Pray of the Berkeley National Labs. Todd, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared. Happy to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about what is your role at the lab and what is the lab?
Thank you. I'm the lab's Chief Strategic Partnerships Officer. I've had that role for almost 6 years. I've been at the lab for almost 11 years. My team is responsible for submitting proposals and negotiating awards for any funding that comes into the laboratory from sponsors other than the Department of Energy. This includes large and small businesses, universities, other research institutes from California, from around the nation and around the world. We are a Department of Energy National Laboratory, so we are owned by the DOE. We're managed by the University of California, and our campus is just up the hill from UC Berkeley. So we have very close ties with the university system, but also with the other 16 Department of Energy national labs. We're part of a broader group of laboratories called Federally Funded Research and Development Centers, or FFRDCs. So other agencies such as NASA, USDA, the Department of Defense have labs that operate in a similar way where we do work funded by our main sponsors, but also with other federal agencies, state agencies, and the private sector.
And 3 of those 16 are here in the East Bay, right?
Yeah, that's right. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is a sister laboratory of ours. And then Sandia National Laboratories has a site in Livermore as well, right next to Livermore Lab. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention SLAC, the Stanford Linear Accelerator Laboratory. I know it's not in the East Bay, but they're part of our Bay Area ecosystem, and we work with them a lot as well.
Good to know. We could learn about what's happening on the peninsula too, because they generate a lot of the same stuff. And from an economic development perspective, if you're listening to this and you're wondering, why are we talking about the labs? You heard Todd's title is Strategic Partnerships. And he's going to talk throughout this episode about how the labs work with the city, with the university to help foster growth of companies. So before we dive into that, though, Todd, why don't you talk about the history of the labs and how it was founded and how it's evolved over time?
Sure thing, Jared. I'd like to ask if people have seen the movie Oppenheimer, because it tells a great story about an important period in our history as a country. That was the genesis of Berkeley Lab. We are Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Ernest Lawrence was one of the leading figures in that narrative, and he worked with Oppenheimer closely to scale up technologies, doing nuclear physics, and really led to the Manhattan Project. When what Lawrence was doing became a bit too big and dangerous to do on campus, they moved up the hill. You can still see the building that houses our advanced light source is where he built some of his bigger accelerators that kind of led to his Nobel Prize and led to the development of synchrotron and cyclotron technology around the country and around the world. We were, at that time, the first national lab. Lawrence Livermore Lab spun off because they were doing things even bigger and maybe that you want to be farther out from civilization at the time. And so we work closely among all the national labs, and we have this mantra, team science. We worked on large problems of national importance related to health, security, energy, and the environment. It's a very broad research portfolio across several different sectors, but we really focus, our tagline at the lab is bringing science solutions to the world. So we aren't just doing science for science's sake. We're doing things that we think will have an impact in the world, whether it's commercialization of technology, starting new companies, helping with workforce development and education, and engaging with our local communities to make sure we're doing things that are relevant and important for our stakeholders.
Let's dive into that with more details. How is it structured? How does the lab identify these individuals or ideas, and how do you support them?
Yeah, great question. Our laboratory is divided into 6 main research areas, like a university would be, but we aren't a teaching institution. We do a lot of research funded by the Department of Energy, over $1 billion a year in research funding from the DOE. A mission of the Department of Energy and labs is to engage with industry, commercialize technologies, and to support economic development across the country, in particular with manufacturing jobs. That means we need to take discoveries developed at the lab and advance them to a point where they can be commercialized, for example, licensed to a company to use, like in the pharmaceutical industry or the microelectronics industry. We also have a long history of spinning companies out of the laboratory. Over the past 10 to 20 years, a number of companies have left the lab in medical devices, biotech, pharma, material science and chemistry, and energy technologies. We really like to see lab technologies go out into the marketplace and be commercialized. In parallel, we also look for opportunities to work with companies that may not know what the lab does or may not have heard of our research capabilities. We provide resources for them at our national user facilities where companies can access the Advanced Light Source, the Molecular Foundry, the Joint Genome Institute, or our supercomputing center for free. They can submit a competitive proposal, and if they are okay with publishing the results with us, they can work with our teams at no cost to them, which is incredibly important. We have 5 national user facilities at Berkeley Lab, the most of any DOE laboratory, and we work with over 13,000 users of those facilities every year. We also work with companies to apply for grants with them, so we can help companies get funding from the Department of Energy or other federal agencies such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Defense, et cetera. And we also really actively work with them. We try and identify companies that could benefit from working with our other teams in a more like sponsored research at a university where they can use their private funds to do experiments or develop campaigns with our teams. We can do sponsored research where they can use private funds to support work that we do for them. And we can also co-apply for funding and sometimes use our Department of Energy funding to complement their own private funding and work together in a cooperative way. We have different contract mechanisms to work with our user facilities, to do work for others or strategic partnerships, and also cooperative research and development agreements.
When a company comes in and they have an idea and they want to do research with you, what does that mean? What are some of the tools? What does plugging into a supercomputer mean for the average person out here?
The supercomputer example is a good one. We have a facility called NERSC. It's the National Energy Research Supercomputer. It's not the fastest supercomputer in the country or the world. It's one of them. But we really focus on doing things at a scale where if you're a startup or even like a bank or an oil and gas company, you need to do some simulation or modeling, or you're trying to deploy a small AI model that you've developed yourself, but you want to scale it into a high performance computing algorithm. Our team can work with your computing scientists or your application and technical people to make sure your computational model will scale in our system and then help implement it and deploy it. We can generate data, we can analyze your experimental results, we can help predict better where you're going. That's how companies access NERSC, our high performance computing center. For other types of work, more hands-on lab work, we have a lot of capabilities, for example, in bioprocess scale up, in looking at building technologies such as windows and roofs and utility hookups. In each of those cases, we have test beds and facilities with experts that run them. We have core funding from the Department of Energy to operate them. And we can bring companies in, whether you're a startup or like Chevron or Intel, to work with our teams. We understand what you need to achieve for your product or your technology. We develop a work plan with you, and then we collaborate in the research project, engaging you, bringing you on site if that makes sense. We can really work collaboratively to help you achieve your goals as a company, whether you're a startup in a garage or whether you're a multinational company coming in to develop your next technology.
Give us an example of a company you could tell us about.
You can see the logo here on my screen, Cyclotron Road. This is a lab embedded entrepreneurship program at Berkeley Lab, which we started 10 years ago. We're in our first big decadal anniversary this year, which is exciting. Over the past 10 years, we brought in over 80 companies and over 100 innovators from those companies. It's a 2-year fellowship program that we run in partnership with Activate, which is spun out of Berkeley Lab as well. They provide entrepreneurial support and business mentoring. While at the lab, we provide lab space, access to facilities and expertise. 2 of the companies that we're really excited about that have had a lot of commercial success lately are 12 and Fervo. So Fervo is developing advanced geothermal electricity production technology. They have commercial scale projects now, partnering with Google to provide renewable electricity from geothermal resources. And they've expanded so much where they are now deploying commercial scale projects in Nevada and Utah and moved their headquarters to Houston. They still work a lot with the laboratory. We plug them into other DOE funding opportunities, and they've raised a lot of funding and industry partnerships to deploy their energy production technology. 12 is still based in the Bay Area. They spun out of Stanford University and joined our first cohort in 2015. Now they're taking atmospheric carbon, using renewable electricity and converting it into sustainable aviation fuel. They have a commercial project that they're developing in Washington state. These are two of the types of companies that have come through our incubator program 8 to 10 years ago and are now showing a lot of success, a lot of funding, and a lot of deployment across the country. That's our main goal, having that kind of impact through the companies we work with and support.
If new company is interested, how would they learn more about the Cyclotron Road?
We have if you go to cyclotronroad.lbl.gov, it'll take you to our webpage. You can also reach it from lbl.gov, which is our main lab website. Every year we interview a number of applicants. This year, we're in the process of selecting our finalists for the pitches occurring next month. Applications are typically due in October, and we make selections in the March through May timeframe, and they start in June every summer. So it's a 2-year fellowship starting in June. It's really exciting. This year, for example, we had almost 300 applicants, and we only have room for 10 each year. So it's oversubscribed. There are a lot of really creative scientists and technologists out there coming out of university labs, postdocs, or even people that have worked at startups before and have their own idea that they want to commercialize. People should feel free to reach out and we can talk them through the process and see if they're a fit.
What kind of advice do you have for somebody to make one of 10 from 300?
Something that's really important is program that's focused on science entrepreneurs. So these are people that have a technical background. You need to have a bachelor's degree and to have worked 4 years post-degree in a technical field. But obviously, there's more to a company than just the technology. The more people can learn about their potential customers, the industry they want to enter, the competitive landscape, it'll help them have a preliminary idea of their value proposition, their market, their customers, their partners. We really encourage people, if you can, while you're a graduate student or a postdoc or in college, take advantage of things like the National Science Foundation I-Core program, which teaches you how to develop a business model canvas, how to do customer discovery, learn about, you have a technology or an idea. Is it something people would actually want to use? What feedback do they have for you? And how can you learn from them? That really helps you develop a better story, a better company pitch when you're applying to programs like ours.
Are most of these companies being founded out of the Bay Area? Are they then staying here?
Most of the companies we've had in the program are from the Bay Area. We get a lot of companies from the East Bay, from Berkeley every year. With 10 companies a year, typically 3 might be spinning out of Berkeley Lab or UC Berkeley. We give them lab space at Berkeley Lab, or they can work on campus at UC Berkeley. They work with Activate in Berkeley as well. Many of them, because of the ecosystem and the network and the resources in the Berkeley and Oakland and Emeryville area, they keep staying. We're going on to Hayward or San Leandro now. There are incubators popping up all over the East Bay, which is exciting. And while some of them do move because manufacturing in the Bay Area is not the cheapest thing to do. You may need to go to Nevada to manufacture something at a lower cost to make it price competitive. But most of the companies are staying local. And we work very closely, for example, with the city of Berkeley. I'm on the steering committee for the Berkeley Startup Cluster, which is part of the city government. We are also partnered with the East Bay Economic Development Agency, the East Bay EDA. In fact, the East Bay EDA is a member of our partner advisory board, which is composed of large companies, a couple startups, the East Bay EDA, a couple academic partners, so that they can give us feedback on our strategy for partner engagement. Are we doing the right things to support industry? Are we doing the right things to drive innovation in startups and entrepreneurship? We take feedback seriously from the outside world, from industry, so we can do things that enable that development.
I think that's great. And it merges with the city and the unique position there as a university town and with the lab right there and that coordination. The folks from East Bay EDA, definitely Stephen Bader, patients, have a pulse on what's happening here and how to help promote the technologies and the companies. Glad to see the ecosystem is all working together to foster and grow these companies. If you want to learn more about the Berkeley Startup Cluster and local resources, listen to last week's podcast episode was with the city of Berkeley discussing just that. When a company comes out of the program after they've tested and done things, what kind of resources are on that other side to help them? How do we help them evolve? How do we help them grow? How do we help them stay in this region over the years to come?
Yeah, great question. It's something we're really engaged with the University of California on, as well as the city of Berkeley and the East Bay EDA. Campus is developing a new climate ingenuity hub. People may know the Baker Bioingenuity Hub, constructed within the old Berkeley Art Museum. They have funding to build a climate ingenuity hub just across the street from the main UC Berkeley campus. That is going to, I think, increase the resource, increase the space available for these types of companies, and have the right types of equipment they need for doing R&D, but also doing pilot scale testing, prototyping, treating kind of a test bed environment that they all need, and being very flexible. It's not specific to one technology or one professor. It's something that could be broadly applicable to people coming out of our program or other incubator programs or starting their own company out of the university. In the city of Berkeley itself, there's a huge focus on making sure there's lab space that's appropriate for the spin-offs coming out of our company, coming out of our incubator program. That's something that we work a lot with the city of Berkeley on and with Activate as well. Creating that broader environment of both economic incentives, ease of permitting, getting people into space is super important, especially as we scale. We've even been talking about helping develop a battery manufacturing hub for next generation battery technologies, where you could go from innovation and entrepreneurship and startup to workforce development and education at this hub, to having some pilot lines for testing the manufacturing of different battery technologies. So we're looking at different sites in the East Bay. Our team in our energy technologies area, led by Alicia Ward, has been really focused on building a consortium, a network from the East Bay, the broader Bay Area, the state of California, and Department of Energy to support this type of broader hub that would serve many companies in a key area for our state and our country here in the East Bay along the Contra Costa shoreline or other sites.
Yeah, and there's definitely some places in Contra Costa that I know would be interested and are probably engaged in those conversations, and Solano too,
Mm.
that would love to see it. And it's good to keep it here, right in the vicinity of the labs and everything else. AI is throwing all of those past curves out of proportion at the rate it's growing. What are you seeing out there? What should cities know about it? What should they be scared of? What should they embrace? And how's the lab partaking in some of this?
Yeah, great question. It's something we've been working on AI and machine learning since before it was the headline that it is now. I've been at the lab 11 years. And even back then, before I started, it was something that our computing team was developing. We did a lot of fundamental R&D around how do you build the right kind of models to support AI? What kind of algorithms and hardware do you need? And we work closely with NERSC, and obviously built with commercial components. So we work closely with vendors that are selling chips and developing technologies. I won't name names, but you can imagine we're working with all the major computing players in AI. In terms of where we see our impact in AI, it's really around how can we do science and discovery faster and better using AI? How can it accelerate our decision-making processes? How can it help predict outcomes or synthesizing new materials for batteries or semiconductors or other things? How can we use it to inform an acceleration of biotech R&D development so that it doesn't take 10 years to go from concept to product? Maybe we can shave that down to 5 years. We're taking a very application focus, like microelectronics, quantum computing, industrial biomanufacturing, and then using AI tools that are really geared toward the data we've generated and the products we're trying to make and the processes we're trying to develop. That's one idea, to accelerate the pace at which we make meaningful advances in science. A big part of that is developing sensors and controls, doing more real-time process monitoring and optimization. Instead of running an experiment with a set of parameters, letting it go for a couple days or a week, we can use real-time sensing and controls and feed them into AI models. We have what we call self-driving labs. You can change the parameters of a bioprocess or a chemical material process on the fly and make it better as you're developing it in real time instead of waiting, analyzing data, designing a new experiment. It's really more real time, more continuous processing of data to generate meaningful results faster.
From the energy side, because I know the lab does a lot with energy. When you look at AI, companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, they're all saying the advancement of AI is throwing off their own zero emission goals and 100% clean energy goals. How can the lab help do that? And what should we just know about the power consumption of around AI?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We led a report released late last year, funded by the Department of Energy and across several national labs around energy efficiency at data centers. We have a team in our energy technologies area focused on that within the DOE complex. I encourage people to look that up. We're working with companies that operate data centers and are doing AI. I won't name names, but you can imagine we're working with these same stakeholders. That's one thing, is looking at the data center energy consumption and energy supply on that level. Another thing we've been doing for a long time is developing energy efficient micro. That's been a big focus of our computing sciences area, in particular around material science. We have a very cross-disciplinary team looking at how can we build more energy efficient microelectronics? How can we use quantum computing as well in a more energy efficient way to broadly tackle these problems and make AI less energy intense? Those are the things we're working on, both the macro level at the data center, but then also at the materials level, the semiconductor level, the microelectronics systems level.
What advice do you have for local elected officials and local business leaders around this future of AI? What nuggets do you want them to take away if they remember one or two things about where AI is going?
Oh, great question. And my background's in biotechnology. I worked at a few startups before coming to the lab. In working closely with our team and with leadership at the laboratory, there are societal concerns around the role of AI, how it will affect our lives, our jobs, et cetera. We view AI as something that could dramatically enhance productivity, make our jobs easier, and allow us to do new things that maybe AI can't do. In terms of how communities, cities could interface with it, or looking at AI as a way to make energy delivery in our supply chains more efficient, could lower your energy costs, make it more reliable. We're looking at ways to, for example, early detection and prevention of wildfires using sensing and imaging from around our infrastructure. And also in terms of resilience to weather events, climate events, things like that. So I think AI could play a key role in these broader societal factors of disaster resilience, mitigation, and recovery, but also just making our energy supply chains more efficient and effective.
And let's talk a little bit about your background in the bioscience and life science space. Every economic development director in the area all say, we want life science companies here. From your perspective, where does a life science company grow? How do they work with the lab? And what do they need to be successful at? I don't know if you have any insights into that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. I got my PhD at UCSF. So again, on the peninsula, sorry, but I got my MBA at Berkeley. So that's on the right side of the bay. And after getting my PhD, I worked at a couple startups in South San Francisco and then realized that human health is going to be dramatically affected by climate change. And so I thought about going to industrial biotechnology, biofuels, bioproducts. And so I joined a company called Amyris, which was spun out of UC Berkeley. Jay Keesing was one of the co-founders. And so I worked there for 6 years at Emeryville. And that's where I got to know the Department of Energy really well. We had funding from them back in 2008 and 10. I also got to know the national labs really well, both Berkeley Lab and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. In terms of healthcare biotech is very well established. The lab works a lot with the pharmaceutical industry and drug discovery at the Advanced Light Source. Most of the major pharmaceutical companies work at the lab. Other labs like Argonne National Laboratory and Brookhaven have light sources that are useful for structure determination, drug discovery and characterization, antibody development, things like that. But we also do like fundamental research in the biosciences that leads to a lot of startups depending on the innovation, the product that you're in, whether it's tools to make molecular biology easier. For example, CRISPR-Cas9, Jennifer Doudna won the Nobel Prize for that a few years ago. The initial work she did was funded at Berkeley Lab in her affiliate appointment because I don't think people really knew what she would find studying these organisms and these systems. So that's the kind of thing where basic research at the lab can lead to a change in industry and a Nobel
Yeah.
Prize. For other companies, so the industrial biotechnology space for biofuels, biomaterials, trying to we make plastics, we make materials, everything is made from oil, from petrochemicals. We've taken the approach that biology could make a lot of those molecules in a more sustainable way with lower carbon emissions, lower energy use, lower water use. That's still a big focus of the laboratory. When I joined the lab, I got tired of working at startups. It was a roller coaster, which is fun for a while, but I needed a break. So I came in and started leading the Advanced Biofuels and Bioproducts Process Development Unit, the ABPDU. And over the past 10 years, that team has worked with over 80 startup companies that have launched, I believe, 17 products commercially based on the work that we've done. It's creating that type of facility where companies can come in, develop their process, scale it up to the pilot scale, produce kilograms of product that they can use to develop their market, sample to customers, sample to partners. We enable them to learn the process themselves, work side by side with us. Another key component of the ecosystem is creating a shared resource that multiple companies can work at and learn together from.
Wow, so much going on just right here, and in every way you're engaging with these companies and the research the people at the lab are doing beyond partnering with the private companies. Is there more you could talk about other activities that go on with the lab past the incubation, some of the broader work that the organization is doing?
Related to small businesses, we work a lot with companies on programs funded by the Small Business Administration, the SBIR, STTR programs. We support every year dozens of companies' applications, help them get funding. And we end up working with maybe 10 to 12 projects that are awarded every year for startups that get funding from DOE, NSF, other federal agencies. We can support them as a subcontractor for their federal projects. Another example of how we work with industry is the Center for X-ray Optics. This was born many years ago out of Semitech Consortium. It's an industry consortium doing pre-competitive research at the lab, all supporting the development of equipment and technology and analytics that they can then use for their next-gen manufacturing. Intel, for example, has been one of the largest sponsors and partners of research at the laboratory at the Center for X-ray Optics. That's one example. And I mentioned the pharmaceutical companies that work with the Advanced Light Source. We really span that range from startups to large industry in key technical areas in critical and emerging technologies.
Anything else you want to share with the audience before we head out about the great work you guys are doing in our communities and inventing cool things here?
No, thanks. I will leave this discussion with one thing. It's to thank the community in the East Bay and the Bay Area. They're so supportive of the lab. We couldn't do what we do without the people that work here, without the students that come in, our various internship programs, without the companies that we help support. It's not just about spinning out companies. It's also about supporting the ecosystem that's growing here organically and naturally. And the other thing I'll say is we can help you access resource and expertise at other labs as well. I mentioned there are 17 DOE labs. We work with all of them on a lot of projects. We compete with them, but we also collaborate with them. If you work with us or you come to us and you have a problem that we can't help, we're happy to refer you to Argonne National Lab in Chicago, Oak Ridge in Tennessee. I think that broader ecosystem is available to the East Bay. We can't solve every problem, but we can help you find the right resources across the complex.
Do you guys have any economic data on the impact of the lab over the decades here in the area? The number of jobs you've created, the number of companies?
We're updating our economic impact report as we speak. We published an economic impact report back in 2020 that you can download from our website. For Cyclotron Road, the Lab Embedded Entrepreneur Program, nearly 90 companies have come through. They've raised over $3.2 billion in follow-on funding in aggregate over that time,
Wow.
and created over 2,000 jobs. So that's just one program at the lab where we brought in companies to help incubate them. That's the impact. In terms of our broader impact procurement, other spinoffs, that'll be in our updated report, but you can look back at the one from a few years ago to see.
I think that's really a good perspective of economic impact. 2,000 jobs, 10 companies in one program over a decade, right? And you have number of programs and you've been around for several decades. I think that's a good context to how much you're contributing to the region. The technology advancements that are coming out of there are really cool. I appreciate it. Todd Pray from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and the Cyclotron Road program.
Thanks so much, Jared. Really good talking to
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.